All right. You ready?
Yeah. I am. Okay.
All right. Let's get this nice started here. And away. Ready? Here we go. Welcome. You're listening to Sports Econ 101, the show where we discuss sports topics from a business perspective. I'm your host, Edward Brown, along with my co-host, Bruce McGowan, longtime sports radio personality. Now, today we don't have a guest, but we've got a lot of things to cover.
Yeah, a lot of things to cover. I think the story about the Cleveland Indians is something that really needs to be mentioned because, they play in a city that traditionally has had some great, but it goes back a long ways that they had the great baseball, and more recently too. But I think that they deserve a little love. So we'll talk about them and talk about some of the great baseball cities in America. Which are the great baseball cities, in your opinion, in my opinion?
All right, when you say great baseball teams, you going back to Cleveland Spiders?
That's going way back before the turn of that's right. It's turn of the century. They were the worst team. Actually, I think they still have the worst record in the history of the game.
Yeah, they lost 116 games out of 124. Something ridiculous.
Cleveland
like that.
Spiders. A great name for it. Yeah. Isn't there a team called the University of Richmond Spiders, I think?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think there is.
Was it Santa Cruz Banana Slugs or something?
Yeah, the University of California Santa Cruz Banana Slugs. Yeah, that's right.
Hate those things.
Oh, yeah.
Also want to cover a few things. Texas high school stadium is going to cost $72 million. A high school stadium, and they're going to spend $72 million.
Well, I hope a lot of teams are going to use it. I hope it's not just for one school. I think it's probably a centralized, hopefully.
I'm thinking, how does that make economic sense?
Well, if you bring a lot of people in and they spend a lot of money in the community, maybe it does. But $72 million?
Yeah, I know.
What do they got? Luxury suites for high school?
Yeah,
Come on.
Maybe.
Yeah, they probably do. It's just more modified, I guess.
Maybe half of it goes to permits. The way these cities are with their permits.
Yeah, that's true.
Crazy. All right. This segment of Sports Econ 101 is sponsored by Pacific Private Money, providing mortgage investments that are currently yielding over 7.5%, secured by real estate, mostly in California Bay Area. Doesn't get any more conservative than that. Check them out at pacificprivatemoney.com, and don't touch that dial because you're listening to Sports Econ 101, and we're going to be right back.
Okay.
So we're going to be right back because sometimes we have to go to the bathroom, right? Ready? Well, welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Edward Brown here along with Bruce McGowan. So, Bruce, you wanted to talk about the Cleveland Indians.
Yeah, this 22nd or 22-game winning streak, as we speak, it could go longer, and it's supposed to be a major league record. We should point out, now, that the 1916 New York Giants won 26 games in a row. However, during that streak, there was a game that ended in a tie. The game was suspended. It was never replayed. So, technically, the record for most consecutive wins uninterrupted is now set by Cleveland. And I think Cleveland is such a great story. You look at that infield, with Lindor and Ramirez. Ramirez, a great hustle play the other night to set up the winning run. Jay Bruce comes over from the Mets. He gets a big hit. Corey Kluber's having a Cy Young season. Cody Allen out of the bullpen. And then Terry Francona, you talk about a break. Him being available. Why did Boston get rid of him? Of course, Boston's still got a pretty good manager, but they just have the right combination. And the only thing that surprises me, Edward, is the crowds. Listen, for this record-breaking game, and the crowd was great, but they have not drawn the big crowds that you would think an American League champion would draw. So that's sort of a surprise, and it leads me to, unfortunately, say that Cleveland is not one of the great baseball towns. It could be again because it's one of the older towns, but it's just not.
They used to say Cleveland Municipal Stadium was the largest.
The mistake by the lake. Yeah.
What they had, like 70,000.
Oh, they could fit 90,000. I think maybe it was 90 for football. I don't know, but that was a terrible place to play. For football it was okay. For baseball, you were just lost.
How's the weather in Cleveland right now?
It's cold. It's, I mean, it's not cold. It's cool. It's windy. This time of year it's starting to get a little chilly, and you get deep into the season, and they could have some problems if they get in the World Series. I really think the way Cleveland's positioning themselves with this winning streak, they are putting themselves in a position where they're going to play the wild card team, which would probably be either the New York Yankees or Minnesota Twins. Who, by the way, the Minnesota Twins, what a great story that has been. They had 2 walk-off wins this week with home runs. And this was one of the worst teams in baseball, and now suddenly they've come alive. Another city that's kind of a front-running town in terms of baseball. It's a great football town, but Minnesota or Cleveland or Cincinnati even, which used to be a great baseball town, in the list of top baseball towns. Detroit, Pittsburgh, those are all old traditional cities, but they just don't have the kind of sustained support that a St. Louis or a New York or a Boston.
Yeah, I'm kind of guessing. Again, a lot of it has to do with the weather.
Some of that has to do with it. I think a lot of it has to do with just tradition and winning, recent winning. Fans going to flock to see winners. St. Louis has had great teams. Even in the 1970s when they weren't winning, they were competitive. They've had great teams for so long.
How does Minnesota do during hockey season? I mean, they usually pack them in.
Oh, yeah. That's another thing that amazed me is when they moved their North Stars to Dallas. I think that was a big mistake, and now they've got the Wild there. But, I mean, you talk about that's the center of hockey fandom in America. Minnesota, Wisconsin, maybe Northern Illinois. I mean, how can you move a team out of Minnesota? But back to Cleveland, I really think that Cleveland is going to do it this year. I mean, I think they're going to be in the World Series, whether they win it all. Teams that lose in the World Series sometimes come back with a little more determination. Look at Kansas City a couple of years ago. And Cleveland, if you look at that lineup, it's a young team. There's a lot of heart there. There's a great brain trust running the team with, as I mentioned, Terry Francona, just even-keeled, kind of like Bruce Bochy. Yeah. Very similar, or Bobby Cox.
Well, why did Boston get rid of Francona?
I think it was a contract issue, and there was some front office friction, and, saying familiarity breeds contempt. Yeah. Sometimes you know too much about us. Same thing reason the Giants parted ways with Dusty Baker, although Dusty was the one who precipitated that. I think it was just, you're around a place for 10 years and you know where all the bodies are buried.
Yeah, but you had Boston was finally winning and started in 2004.
It didn't make a lot of sense, although they have, had good management since then on the field. So, but I think, Terry Francona is a rarity. We got to know him slightly in 2003 when he was with the A's, and better person in baseball, you really can't. Good guy.
Yeah, and is that Tito, right?
His dad was a very good player. Tito Francona played, and we mentioned the Indians. He played with the Indians, played with the Cardinals, good outfielder, not a power hitting player. Terry was a good ball player. Yeah. Terry played with the Expos, and
he's a catcher, right?
No, outfielder like his dad, and not a great player, but a solid player, smart players. Usually the guys that are sort of either marginal or kind of good players that become great managers because they don't take the little things for granted. They have to work hard. I mean, Bruce Bochy, for instance, the Giants skipper, always a second-string catcher.
Yeah. It always seems like all the catchers become the
well, they're the quarterbacks. Yeah. Mike Scioscia. I mean, you look at them; they have to run the game, and they have to be the cool head out there. And sometimes they have to be the toughest guy out there. They're sort of like football players in that respect.
I wonder if Buster Posey will go into. I don't think so. He doesn't seem to have that kind of temperament.
You never know, though. I mean, you never know with Buster. He's so serene and so calm. If you're around him in the clubhouse, you notice this air of just calmness. Nothing seems to faze that guy, and I love that. Yeah. Derek Carr, the Raider quarterback, very excitable. But if you sit down and talk with him, they're calm about him. The great athletes have that, and they have that focus, that ability to focus in the tough situations where they can see things clearly. And I think that's what sets them. One of the many things that sets great athletes apart is their ability to focus and be calm when everything around them is just swirling and going crazy.
And you were talking about great baseball stadiums. Now, the AT&T Park is new,
relatively new. 18 years old. Yeah. Hard to believe it's 18 years old.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah. I mean, that is a really good.
It is. Park. It's revitalized baseball in the Bay Area too. Yeah. For San Francisco anyway. I mean, San Francisco was always a decent baseball town, but never great. Once they moved into the new park, they really emphasized the traditions and their ties to the past, and their the statues to Cepeda and Mesa, McCovey and Marichal, and
the weather's better. It's easier to get to.
It is, and it's revitalized the whole area of downtown. It's interesting. This whole emphasis on building downtown stadiums now and revitalizing inner cities, whereas back in the 70s, there was a tendency to move into the suburbs and build these, antiseptic, sterile palaces that all look the same.
But I think also it has to do with, how expensive the land is.
That's a lot of it. Yeah, you got to work out a deal. I mean, the A's are trying to work out a deal to get a stadium downtown, and they found a spot not far from downtown where the Raiders, ironically, used to play back in the old AFL days. And there's no assurances that they'll get this thing done, but I think it'll be a good alternative to the Coliseum. Although I said all along, the Coliseum is a great location. Yeah, there's not a lot to do around there.
Yeah.
But parking,
it's easy
accessibility to the freeway.
Wait, how many acres do you need for the stadium and the parking?
Not as much. What you want to do in this day and age also is encourage people to take mass transit. So you have it near railroad, the bus stations, whatever. So or within walking distance of downtown. That's what you want.
Yeah, because that's a lot easier. Whether you're a general that's the thing I've kind of argued about with where we live. They have this thing called the smart train. And if you're a general contractor or a traveling salesman type, you can't take it. It doesn't make sense. But if you're going to a ballpark, all you're doing is going to the ballpark, watch the game, and come back.
It's more for recreation, I think, and more for fans, for people that are sightseeing or whatever. But yeah, for a ballpark, I think you want to be, ideally within walking distance of downtown. I mean, it's worked. Look at all the ballparks now. Fenway Park, Cleveland's Progressive Field. I mean, Denver has got a great ballpark. But Anomaly, that was built, at the beginning of this whole run of stadiums that were sort of antiseptic and sterile. But Dodger Stadium is a baseball-only stadium. I don't think they've had many football games there. And it's in an area which is kind of a pain, actually, to get to. Parking is a pain. There's plenty of parking there. The reason people come late and leave early is it's very difficult getting in and out of that place.
And what about San Diego?
San Diego, I like San Diego's location. It's downtown. It's kind of nestled in amongst an area that has become very, very popular. And
I heard it's kind of hard to get in and out of.
No, not my experience. But again, I went. First series ever played there, where the Giants played there in 2000, and I guess it was 2004. Yeah.
All right, we're going to ask some trivia questions now, talking football. This fourth season quarterback in 1983 threw 24 touchdowns with 4,348 passing yards. He led the league with completions. That was pretty much it for his career.
Wow, 1983.
1983. Who is this Chiefs quarterback?
Oh,
yeah, I'm going to give you a little hint on that. All right. Econ 101. The answer to that question. Don't touch that dial. We're going to be right back.
I'm drawing a blank on that one.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with this guy. I figured if I added something that wasn't too old.
Yeah. 1983. Who would be the quarterback in 83 for the Chiefs?
Do anything exciting this weekend?
I got a Raiders game on Sunday, but that's going to be a blowout. They're playing the Jets. And then tomorrow, I'm not sure. Not sure. How about you?
Tonight we're going to go to Trek Winery in Nevada. A friend of ours is playing.
Oh, sweet. You see some music at a winery. Yeah. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a bar.
Small concert, like a jazz concert?
Yeah. He plays all kinds of music.
Nice. Well, that sounds like fun. Yeah. Sit there with a glass of wine and like some good music. That's great.
Anything else you want to cover about the baseball stadiums or anything?
No, it's going to kind of transition into the NFL a little bit if you'd like.
Sure.
Whatever you want to talk about.
We'll start with you. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Edward Brown here along with Bruce McGowan. Here was our first trivia question. This fourth season quarterback in 1983 threw 24 touchdowns with 4,348 passing yards. He led the league with 346 completions. That was pretty much it for his career. Who was this Chiefs quarterback?
And I'm drawing a total blank on that one.
Bill Kenny.
Oh yeah, from I think from the University of Nebraska, I believe.
I just
Yeah, he didn't.
That's like
No, I never would have
years ago.
I never would have gotten that when Bill Kenny was as a name that you bring him up and it's like, oh yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
Never even thought about him.
He probably came the same way as Montana. Didn't they come in '79?
79, yeah.
So,
It's interesting. Yeah, you mentioned Joe Montana. I was just thinking of Bill Walsh, and I had a chance with a friend of mine to do an interview with Bill Walsh about 6 months before he died, and did not get to be a head coach until he was 47 years old, which is kind of unfortunate. He retired at 57. And you think about John Madden. John Madden started his coaching career at 32 or 33 and quit at 43. So the two greatest coaches in the history of the Bay Area, probably in football, and talk about contrasting careers. Yeah, interesting people. John Madden, by the way, 80 years old, major heart problems. He's out of the national scene because he's no longer doing television, but he does work for the local radio station, local CBS affiliate. He does a little commentary with the news anchor and the sports anchor in the morning, and he's back on the air. And I heard him this morning, and he sounded as enthusiastic and as bright as ever.
Good.
Likable guy.
Yeah.
I mean, John Madden, the thing about him, I got to know him slightly when I was a young reporter covering the Raiders back in the 70s. And what you see is what you get. There's no BS to John Madden. Some people don't like the boom and all the histrionics, but that's who he is.
Yeah.
And I think that's why he was so popular. And the players loved him. He wore his heart in his sleeve, but I think the last couple of years, they were a mediocre team, man. They just got to him. That and the flying. He hated flying.
Yeah.
I remember him just walking up and down the jetway. It wasn't so much going up in the air and being scared of being up in the air. It was he had a problem with small spaces.
Oh,
yeah.
More claustrophobic.
Claustrophobic thing.
Oh,
Yeah, a lot of people who have flying problems, that's a difficulty. That's what it is for a lot of people.
My aunt was scared of flying, and because she absolutely needed to do some kind of traveling with the family, vacation stuff. What she did was she took a like a seminar class, and they taught her. They said, well, you know what? Part of this is because you don't know what's going on. So what we're going to do is we're going to teach you, like when you hear the ding, that what does that mean? And basically, depending on how many dings and all that kind of stuff you hear, it's the pilot basically letting the stewardess know, look, you can't bother me, no matter what, don't bother me now because we're ready to take off, or whatever the situation. Calm her, because then she could concentrate more on, this is what's going on, rather than just this unknown.
As a kid, up until I was in my teens, just scared to death when I got in the plane, nervous, about the takeoff, and the landing. And then, I sat with my dad a bunch of times, and my dad was a pilot during the war. He flew P-38s over in the Pacific, and he always used to explain to me what's going on, and that kind of calmed me down.
That's the same thing.
And then I went up with him in a small plane many times, and that, I tell you, you really have that sense of flying. When you're in a small plane, and oh gosh, but that really calmed me down. I think that having a dad, he was always such an even-keeled guy. But yeah, I could see it, and Madden was that way. Madden would, stalk the jet way up and down, and he'd be talking to people.
But he took a bus.
He did well. Once he got out of football, once he got out of, and when I say out of coaching, he could afford to do that because he didn't have to be there with the team, and he enjoyed the interaction, the small towns. He enjoyed mingling with people. John Madden is one of the most convivial, likable people who enjoys interacting with others. Not a lot of celebrities are that way, but he was.
So I guess he didn't feel the small space claustrophobia in a bus. I guess because he could walk up and down.
And again, the bus. How long is a bus ride? And again, also with the Madden bus, he could get out anytime he wanted. That was part of the deal. You can get out, stop the bus, and take a walk. Stop at the rest stop, stop at the restaurant. It's just flying with a football team, especially a football team. They really pack you in there. I did a lot of traveling with the Raiders, a lot in the late '90s when they returned in early 2000s, and they just jam you guys in there. I mean, not the players. The players are given a little room, but the middle part of the plane where all the front office folks sit and all the, boy.
Because, that's what I was wondering, because football players are big, so they have to have.
Oh, they have extra room. Yeah. The best way to fly.
Small, I was gonna say,
small plane, a lot of room. I've traveled with baseball teams before, and that's pretty nice too. Baseball teams, I tell you, if you got to travel with a baseball team, that's not a bad way to go.
Well, okay, so NBA, how many players?
Well, you got 15 guys. Yeah,
right?
I mean, you got this
baseball, you got 25 plus.
Yeah,
and then what do you have, 60?
With football, you got about 50 players, 45 or 47 active. I guess it's 53 active now, isn't it? Gosh. And then you have the coaching staff and the video people. It's a big, it's usually a couple of hundred people on that plane. It's almost a full plane. It's not comfortable.
Do they own their own planes?
No, they charter. They usually charter a particular plane and a crew for the year. Same thing with baseball, basketball. Some teams do have their own planes, own their own planes.
Probably Mark Cuban.
Yeah, well, I mean, it makes sense, and you want to have the same crew. You want to have the continuity. It's I mean, the average person listening to this thinking, "Oh, gee, these guys have such a rough life." Well, a lot of traveling and the changing of the time zones and getting in at weird hours. I mean, I worked a game the other night, and I was just thinking about this. The Giants didn't start a game with the Dodgers the other night because of a rain delay till 10:50 at night. The game ended at 2. The game ended at just about 2:15 in the morning.
Wait. I mean, that long a rain delay.
Yeah.
Can't they just cancel it?
Well, they were talking about having a doubleheader, a day-night doubleheader. The Dodgers didn't want to do that. Then they were talking about maybe extending it to Thursday, the off day. The Dodgers and Giants didn't want to do that. And this was, they were scrambling for alternatives, and they figured, we got to get this game in. And I just remember, I got home and got to bed at 3, and I was thinking, some of these guys, this is not an unusual scenario for them, to have games like this that last into the early morning hours.
Okay, so I got a question for you on this. The Dodgers are in first, and the Giants are in last, and there's no way the Giants are going to make the playoffs, and for sure the Dodgers are going to be in the playoffs. 99% sure. I wonder if they would have a little bit more pull as to, hey,
No, not necessarily, and especially since it's in San Francisco's home park. But I think that the Giants players wanted to leave. They didn't want to hang out, and neither did the Dodgers. They didn't want to start the game at 10:50. That was absurd. I mean, when they finally told us in the press box, and it was crazy. We had rain, heavy rains. We had lightning, a spectacular lightning storm and thunder, which is unusual for the Bay Area, especially in the fall. And this went on for a couple of hours. And I was thinking, God, the field's going to be unplayable. It was amazing. The field was dry. It was in good shape.
Well, they covered it up.
Yeah, they covered up the infield. The game itself was actually a very entertaining game. The Giants were up 4-0. The Dodgers came back and tied it. Dodgers actually had the lead briefly. Giants took the lead back. Dodgers tied it. Giants finally won it. So it was a very entertaining game, despite the fact that it started at 10:50. And there were maybe, 10,000 fans, and half of them were Dodger fans. So it was kind of an amazing. they were Dodger fans were making a lot of noise. I tell you, they've got some great. Back to my whole thing about baseball towns. LA is a great baseball town. San Francisco has become one. New York and Boston, St. Louis, Chicago, of course. And then you go to your second tier towns like Detroit and Cincinnati and Cleveland and Pittsburgh. When those teams are good, and the tradition and going back a number of years. Some cities I just don't think will ever have great baseball towns. I don't think there's ever going to be a great Tampa, Texas, Minnesota is just not a great baseball town. Kansas City, sometimes. Colorado is not a bad place, but it's just a bizarre, with that ball carrying so far. The game is kind of cartoonish, and it's just I just find baseball in Colorado at the Mile High bizarre. And they do have good fans though. They have that's a good sports town. Denver. I went to school there, and it's a great sports town, especially for football.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But as far as baseball towns go, St. Louis, boy, and the fans in St. Louis not only knowledgeable but likable. It's not like New York or Boston where they just they're rough. They got that rough edge.
Yeah, and then is it more fair weather friends then?
No, they're just very loyal. These are our boys. They're our team. I mean, there's not a lot to do in St. Louis. What is there?
No, that's what I'm saying. Is that in St. Louis, they wouldn't be fair weather friends.
No,
maybe in places like New York.
New York and Boston have always been up until 1967. Boston was not a good baseball town, generally speaking, because they had some crappy teams most of the time. Since the impossible dream season of Carl Yastrzemski and Jim Longborg, that franchise has been, the last 50 years, has been one of the best in baseball. You go to a game at Fenway and you read the local papers, and you're just totally immersed in the game. And the entire region of New England goes crazy for that team. It's a fun experience. I was up there for the 1986 World Series, and I remember when they lost that 6th game when the ball went through Bill Buckner's legs. And I remember I was sitting in a bar with a bunch of people for Game 7, and they knew they were going to lose before the game even started. We're going to lose. They just had this fatalistic approach because they've been through it too many times.
Yeah. Well, also the way to lose, because it wasn't just the Bill Buckner. There was a few plays before that that were causing.
Yeah, there were.
All right, so we're going to cut to our second commercial break.
We're moving along so fast here.
I know. Well, it's because we don't have any guests.
That's because we're having a good time.
All right. Who was the first Hall of Fame quarterback to ever play for the Baltimore Colts?
Good question.
That's our trivia question, right?
Yeah.
We want you to email Edward at SportsEcon101 the answer to that question. Nice short one here.
Okay.
Who was the first Hall of Fame quarterback to ever play for the Baltimore Colts?
Okay.
Simple question, right?
Simple question.
Simple question.
I think I got the answer to that one.
Really?
Yeah, well, I bet you it's a trick question. I got the feeling it is.
I just asked it.
Okay.
All
right.
So we already talked about the Texas high school stadium costing $72 million.
That's crazy.
And maybe we'll get into a little bit of like Janikowski asking to take a pay cut and Brock Osweiler back to the Broncos. Pay cut. Everyone's taking a pay cut except a lot of guys. Way too much. Yeah. All right, don't touch that dial. Sports Econ 101 will be right back.
Pay cut. One good thing about working until 2 in the morning, I get overtime.
What's that?
Hey, this job, I shouldn't jinx myself because it's just so routine. I've just gotten into this. But it's nice. It's not boring, but it's nice. It's routine, but it's nice to work at a place where you don't have a lot of nitpicking and politicking going on. And the reason for that is everybody is too busy.
Yeah, that's good.
There's always something going on. In a 24-hour news cycle, you're constantly updating, you're constantly regurgitating, and same thing with sports. I just have never worked at a place like this before. It's refreshing.
So the Devil's Workshop.
So. That's very true. It's very true. It feels weird though. Sometimes I feel like I'm in a dream because I'm working with a lot of people I used to work with at other stations.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's really nice. It's really nice.
I mean, a lot of people would love your job,
Well, I hope I can stay there for a few years. I'd like to do it 4 or 5 or 6,
I mean, why wouldn't you be able to?
Yeah, there's no reason unless I screw up on the air. And I don't think they're going to. I'm not exactly breaking the bank either, so, It's a great place. Exactly, it is a good place to work. It really is. Good people.
Oh, wait.
All right.
Welcome back to Sports Econ 101 one more time. I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with Bruce McGowan. Second trivia question. Who was the first Hall of Fame quarterback to ever play for the Baltimore Colts?
That's got to be Johnny Unitas.
That's what I would have thought.
But it isn't.
It isn't.
That's why I'm saying it's a trick question. Who was it?
Y.A. Tittle.
That's a good one. Y.A. Tittle before he came to the 49ers. That's right. Yeah. And he had a great career with the Niners. And then, of course, he went to the New York Giants and got him in a couple of championships. Johnny Unitas, though, played in the greatest, they still call it the greatest game in the history of football, the 1958 NFL championship game against the New York Giants that went into overtime.
That was the one that Frank Gifford got knocked out, right?
Got knocked out of the game, and Alan, Chuck Bednarik hit him, and Alan Amici. Actually, was it Chuck Bednarik? I'm not sure. Because I think Chuck Bednarik played with the Philadelphia Eagles. But anyway, I remember Alan Amici scored the winning touchdown. I remember watching this game. I was 6 years old. It was the first game I can ever remember watching, and my dad told me, he says, you'll never forget this game. We're watching a little black and white fuzzy TV,
for the audience who isn't that old,
right.
Tell them why it's quote considered the greatest.
Well, it was an overtime game, which is unusual. So, and there were so many great plays in the game. I mean, New York came from behind and tied it, and then you had all these Hall of Famers that were playing in the game. Not to mention Johnny Unitas, the greatest quarterback, and he was just starting to hit his stride. And the Colts had a hold on it. They were about to get a hold on that city that was unlike any other kind of relationship a team had with the city. And Baltimore and the Colts were really meant for each other. There are certain teams. It's kind of like Cleveland right now with the Indians. Although, as I said before, I'm surprised the Indians only had 30,000 at the game the other night for the record-breaking win. I don't get that. I don't know if it was the weather. I don't know if the economy up there is bad, but 30,000 for the biggest.
Yeah, because how much did it cost to go to a game in Cleveland?
But more than that, this is a rarity, and you can't even fill that place up. What's going on? They had 22,000 the night before. I don't understand it. So I would not put Cleveland up there among my list of great baseball cities, but Baltimore great baseball town when the team is going good, and a great football town, great sports town.
Well, I bet the Cavs fill it up.
Oh,
of course,
yeah.
you're only talking about, what is that, 8 to 10,000?
You're talking about 18 to 20,000.
18 to 20,000.
Yeah. I mean, basketball is a different thing entirely. But you know, I mean, they almost turn basketball games now into events. Football is an event. Again, for the listeners that don't remember, this is going way back. I mean, I was only 6 years old. I was just a little kid. But in those days, you didn't have any playoffs. You had the winner of the Western Division against the winner of the Eastern Division, and the season was over usually before Christmas. So, you know, you had that one game. Then the whole thing with the playoffs didn't start till the mid-'60s, and then, of course, the NFL came along in '60, and then the leagues merged, and you had, you know, things changed, and then by the late '70s, the league expanded its schedule, and then you have wild cards starting in I think it was 1979 or 80.
Yeah, which I like.
Yeah, I like the wild card because sometimes the hottest team wins it. Not necessarily in football, but in baseball. Yeah. Think about it. The Giants won it in 2000 and I think 2014 as a wild card. They were the second wild card, and the Miami Marlins won it in 2003 as a wild card. But you get hot. You know, you have to have that edge.
And the Oakland Raiders won it
as a wild card. Yeah, that was an improbable win because they hadn't been to the playoffs the previous 2 years, and they didn't go the next year. But they had this one lightning in a bottle season. Jim Plunkett came in and energized the team, and they had a bunch of guys that, you know, Lester Hayes, and of course the great Ted Hendricks was still around. And that was a fun team to watch. And that wasn't John Madden's team, by the way. He was gone by that time. Tom Flores had taken over.
And did Matuzak play on that, or did he come
Matuzak was not on that team. No, you know, they had undergone a lot of changes. A lot of the old guard was gone. They had guys like Kenny King. And I mentioned Lester Hayes came to prominence. Matt Millen was a rookie. The late Bob Chandler, who had a terrific season as a wide receiver. They were kind of a Jim Plunkett, you know, resuscitated his career. They had a lot of new players in that team.
Well, the reason I mentioned Matuzak is I just happened to watch an old MASH episode, and he plays this this private or corporal who wants to get a promotion to being a sergeant, and he's just larger than life. He's a huge human being, and that show was, I think, in 1981.
Yeah.
So it's like just like as he was.
You know, he might have still. I think he actually was still with that team. But yeah, he definitely was with that team because I remember when they were in New Orleans, he told the media, he says, "I'm going to be patrolling, you know, Bourbon Street to make sure these guys." I said, "Well, what about you, John?" "Well, you know, the rules are different for me." You know. John Matuzak was funny. I remember talking to him after a game once, and his eyes were darting back and forth. I said, "You know, if you play for the Oakland Raiders, you really have to realize that other team doesn't even belong on the field, and you have to make them just want to climb into a hole and curl up and die."
Well, you know, it's interesting because it's basically it's intimidation. And, and I remember coaching a couple of teams where I was like the assistant coach, and a couple of times.
Your teams you're talking about?
Yeah, you know, either Little League or you know, a little basketball
fun
or
to do that
fun
stuff,
softball for the girls, right?
Sure.
And the interesting thing is when the kids are playing each other and they know each other, you know, like the scrimmages and stuff, they'll go all out and they won't be scared. But when they play somebody they don't know, everyone gets all intimidated and they let themselves get intimidated, right? Yeah. So I remember there was I was coaching this basketball team one time. Again, and I don't know that much about basketball, but the main coach was out, so I had to sub. But I had noticed for the first like 5 games, our kids were very timid, you know, and the other kids, whoever they played, were probably a little better, but there was just intimidation factor, right? And so
unfamiliarity, maybe.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so I remember, and I remember being a kid too, and falling right into that. If I didn't know another kid, you feel a little timid.
Oh, sure.
So I remember telling our team, guys, you be the intimidators, right? They don't know you. You know how you get scared? Like, let them be scared of you, right? And I kind of gave them
reverse psychology.
Exactly. I gave them a little pep talk. Yeah. And they played really well. They definitely dominated. And I remember about 4 parents coming up to me and saying, "I don't get it. Why were our kids so aggressive?" Anyway, you know, how did they do that?
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, that's the great thing about sports. I mean, it's the psych game, and especially in football, where you have to kind of. I remember hearing the story about Fred Biletnikoff, and the players would say if Fred Biletnikoff wasn't throwing up before a game, something was wrong. And he was always having the dry heaves. Freddie would just.
How could you play after that?
Well, I mean, you get yourself, so wrapped up and so, build up into a frenzy. I mean, football is that.
No, I mean, I understand the throwing.
Oh, yeah.
I'm wondering how do you play well after that?
That's a good question. I mean, sometimes the greatest performances are. I mean, Joe Montana came out in the second half of a bowl game with Notre Dame one year. The greatest half certainly the greatest half he ever had in college. And he was being given IVs and he had a fever of 102. But sometimes when you're sick and you're really down, you can focus a lot more.
Michael Jordan, same thing.
Yeah.
And it was funny because when I was bowling, I remember having a fever, and for whatever reason, I also bowled really well.
Well, it's funny. I have to admit, I've been on the air a few times, and I shouldn't say this, but I was ill, and I shouldn't have been at the station, and I actually did a better job because I was more focused. I couldn't help but think of the things that would distract me normally were just completely lost. I was so focused on being able to, concentrate and do my job. I did a better job. So, by the way, it was fun. The other night I was doing updates for the local CBS radio station when Cleveland was winning their 22nd game, and we broke in and played highlights. It was a lot of fun. And there was something so exciting about being, even though we're 2,000 miles away from it, being able to relay that moment of excitement and drama to people out there. And I think that's one of the things that we really enjoy about our profession is that we're kind of a conduit to these great events to the people. And if they enjoy it, they get a little pleasure out of that. And if you can kind of heighten that and accentuate that, then you have a day's satisfaction.
One last comment about the intimidation thing. I remember I used to do wrist wrestling championships and stuff in Petaluma. Remember?
Petaluma, yes, that's right.
So there was this one guy. The way he would try to intimidate his opponent, he would reach into his pocket and grab a bunch of live crickets and eat them just before. He'd look at them.
How bizarre!
Yeah,
live crickets.
Live crickets. He'd chew them up, swallow them, and then he'd look at his opponent right in the eye.
good source of protein, I guess. I don't know. That sounds pretty.
Sounds like steroids. It should be illegal.
Yeah.
On that.
Yeah.
So a little football again. Brock Osweiler. Is he back to the Broncos? And
I have a hard time keeping track of all this. I mean, there's a guy down. So you think about, pro football. My gosh, I mean, you're an injury away from being washed out of the league.
Yeah.
And I mean, just look at Johnny Manziel with his off the field problems. Is he ever going to play again?
Probably not.
Probably not. Then you got a guy like Deshaun Watson. First game in the pros, and you're playing in front of an emotionally charged Houston crowd. The city is still recovering, obviously, from this horrible tragedy with the hurricane. Yeah. And he goes out and scores a touchdown. And J.J. Watt was talking about it afterwards, how this was more than a game for us. And that's the great thing about football. But you're one injury away in that sport from being out of it. Brock Osweiler is one of those guys his career certainly had it's been a roller coaster.
Bring back Brian Leaf.
God, there was another guy there. He couldn't stay out of his own way.
Yeah.
He had a lot of problems. Now he's doing very well, apparently.
Is he really good?
He's doing very well, but he had a lot of problems. He was in and out of rehab. He had some problems with the law. Yeah, that was.
He was picked before Peyton Manning. That was the big.
Johnny Manziel. Johnny Manziel's a guy who's got off-field problems, and I think sometimes you have too much success too soon, and it goes to your head. I think that's what with Joe Montana. Joe Montana was always kind of small, and he played for Notre Dame, and he had some great wins, but he never was the focus of all the attention. When he got to San Francisco, people kind of didn't really know who he was.
Well, Tom Brady kind of the same.
Tom Brady. I remember seeing Tom Brady in the playoffs against the Raiders in the famous snowball, not snowball, but the tuck game. This kid, he's from the Bay Area, but I mean, he was an afterthought. Who was that quarterback there? Was it Bledsoe that got hurt?
Yeah,
I mean, he had to step in. Yeah. You talk about, getting a break. I mean, that's what you have to have.
Well, and do you remember the Houston Oilers with Warren Moon losing to the Buffalo? No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, losing to the Buffalo Bills, throwing the 35 to 3.
Yes, Frank Reich.
Yeah,
it's like he came out of nowhere.
Yeah, he was the ultimate backup. Frank Reich had some good games, but that was his moment in the sun.
But then he didn't really hear about enough.
Well, he was always a backup. He just had his great. I mean, athletes, they're all capable of it. He had a great team around him. Of course, the Bills, people forget that was the only four Super Bowl in a row.
Yeah,
nobody's done that.
And it was the first one they had the best shot at too, Norwood.
Yeah, that's tough.
Who was the one who backed up Roger Staubach
Well, it was Craig Morton and Staubach. They kind of flipped them back and forth.
But there was somebody else.
Oh, you're talking about Clint Longley.
Yeah,
he came in on Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah.
And this is back in I think the early '70s.
Yeah.
And engineered a great comeback. Yeah, Clint Longley. Yeah, there's the sports is replete with stories of guys that come in off the bench, and I mean, you can go back to 1954, and and the Giants had a hitter. I'm trying to remember the guy's name now.
Night Train Lane? No.
No. They had a guy who hit, I think, 3 home runs in the World Series, and I'm trying to remember his name. And
well, 54, that would have been the Indians. And
Giants, and Willie Mays made the great catch. But there was a guy that came out of nowhere, and he was actually a decent player. But I remember he just, again, caught lightning in a bottle.
And oops, we forgot his name.
I forgot his name. Well, that happens when you get to be my age. Your brain is like a computer. It purges itself of unnecessary information. I guess that's no disregard to the guy, no disrespect to that guy, but I guess it's an unnecessary piece of information.
We'll have to look it up.
Yeah.
All right, here's our last trivia question. Cowboys drafted 2 quarterbacks in the 1989 draft. These quarterbacks finished 3rd and 4th in the Heisman voting in 1988. One quarterback was Troy Aikman.
Right. Who was the other one?
Who was the other?
Good question.
Okay. Econ101.com, and when we come back, we're going to have some closing comments. So again, here's the question. Dallas Cowboys drafted 2 quarterbacks in the 1989 draft. These quarterbacks finished 3rd and 4th in the Heisman voting in 1988. One quarterback was Troy Aikman. Who was the other? All right, don't touch that dial. We're going to be coming back with some closing comments.
And I'm clueless on that one, too. It's funny, I can remember the answer.
Who was that guy?
Who was that guy? God dang it.
You should know the name. I mean,
he was a heavy drinker. I remember that.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, I don't remember that part, but I'll take your word.
He won the game. The Mays catch game. He won it with a little cheap shot homer over the right field wall of like 300 feet.
Oh.
Yeah, left-handed hitter. God, I could see his face.
Look up 1954 World
I'll
Series.
real quick later. 1954 World
You
Series.
got Kurt Gibson coming off the bench in '88.
Mm-hmm. I think this guy was MVP of that World Series. They always talk about May's great catch.
Yeah. Wasn't '88 also the first time that a grand slam was hit in the World Series? If I can't think of.
That may be.
I think so.
Oh no, Bobby Richardson hit one in 1960 against the Pirates. He had 6 RBIs in that game.
So maybe this was the first time a American League.
Okay, here we go. 1954 World Series. All right, here we go.
Oh, wait, no, that would have been for the
Dusty Rhodes.
Dusty Rhodes. Oh yeah.
Great name, Dusty Rhodes. Have to mention that. Dusty Rhodes.
Keep mentioning it here.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Last time for today. I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with Bruce McGowan.
By the way, it was Dusty Rhodes.
Dusty
in
Rhodes.
1954 Giants. I had to look it up, but I should have remembered that.
But again, also a roller ball guy, Dusty Rhodes. Remember roller hockey? What do they call that? Come on.
Not roller hockey, but
No.
yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Roller derby.
Roller derby. He
sounded
sounded like Charlie O'Connell. The Bay Bombers.
Yeah.
Jody Buston.
Yes. or you know what? Dusty Rhodes also was a wrestler.
Yeah, this guy was a good role player. He had a home run that won game 1. The dimensions of ground. They had
290.
290 down the right field line. He hit one just into the corner there. That won the game.
All right, here was our third trivia question. The Dallas Cowboys drafted 2 quarterbacks in the 1989 draft. These quarterbacks finished 3rd and 4th in the Heisman voting in 1988. Troy Aikman. Who was the other?
Again, I'm clueless.
Steve Walsh.
God, Steve Walsh. Now, there's a guy who didn't do much in his pro career at all.
Did he?
No.
He was just strictly.
I don't even know where he went after he left Dallas. Or even played with Dallas. That's a name. There's another name. You mentioned Bill Kenny. I never would have thought of Bill Kenny. I never would have thought of Steve Walsh.
30 years ago almost. Can you imagine?
Well, yeah. I mean, these guys, they come and they go. There are a lot of great. I remember Gary Beeman. There was a great quarterback at UCLA, but he played. I think he played with the Washington Redskins, but he never did much in the pros.
And it's funny because I like guys who do average in college and they do really
well. Tom Brady. What did Tom Brady?
Good point.
Yeah.
All right, here's our thoughts for the day. Trust yourself You know more than you think, right?
I always tell myself that when I go on the air. Yeah, you know more than you think.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And the only
right.
time you should ever look back where you've come.
Now that one I like,
I like
especially
that
when you're
one.
climbing a mountain. But you don't want to look down too far. You want to get
Get a little nervous.
a little nervous. Yeah.
All right. Tune in next week to Sports Econ 101. We're going to be discussing sports topics from a business perspective and asking more sports trivia questions. Thanks for listening. On behalf of our team, I'm your host, Edward Brown. We'll see you next week.
Good night, America.
So long.
All right, that was fun.
Yeah,
That was a good time.
okay, let me stop this thing here. Worked.
Oh, good.